In this tutorial, we take a look at how to acquire Dojo, and then how to perform some of the basic operations that we'd want to do with Dojo by taking a look at our documentation. So first of all, let's go ahead and acquire Dojo. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Downloads link up here. Now we do have the option here where we can just get Dojo Base, or we can move on down and get the entire toolkit. All we need to do is save this to our local machines and then extract it out, and then we'll have our development platform ready for us. Now to include that into your page, you will use this include script type and then dojo/dojo.js. Now when we get to our Dojo project, we're actually going to use a different method altogether. But when you're beginning to develop, it's going to be a good thing to keep your Dojo files local so you can actually open up the files to see what they're doing on the back end and get more familiar with the Dojo library. Now over here to the right hand side, you've got a number of things that you can do. Getting started, documentation, release notes, porting guides, and all downloads. I'm going to go ahead here and click on this Getting Started. Now it does take me to this quick start in the documentation, and we've got the key links, the quick start guide, the install, the say hello, and the debug. Now I do recommend that you take a moment to look at all of these, but let's go ahead and take a look at the say hello. Now this takes us to something called the Book of Dojo. The Book of Dojo is like a user's manual that's written to make it easy for you to do everything that you need to do with Dojo. Now this is to be used in conjunction with the actual API documentation. And if you take a look, you see we have part 1 here, Life with Dojo, and I do recommend that you take a look at a lot of the things in here, but if I go into the Life with Dojo section, I'll end up seeing application examples. It ends up talking about Digit in part 2 and showing you the Dojo widget library. And then we have this JavaScript with Dojo and Digit. So if we take a look at that, it talks about JavaScript programming. The first thing you see here is the functions used everywhere. Let's go ahead and take a look at that because that's going to cover a lot of the basics of what we're going to find whenever we work in the Dojo toolkit. Here you see dojo.require as well as Dojo by ID and Digit by ID, add on load, connect, and for each. Now each one of these do a very specific thing. Dojo.require, I'm going to go ahead and click on that, includes some functionality from another module. So here's the example. So if you were wanting to include a function from a specific module, you would need to require that module be loaded. And Dojo would take care of loading the appropriate information. So whenever we're using something beyond the Dojo base, you'll need to use a require statement. Now over to the left hand side, I see it's got the by ID and Digit by ID, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And this is how we can make selections. We can do Dojo by ID and then tell it what the element ID is that we're looking for, and it's going to return that for us. So then we can manipulate it. It's a lot like the document.getElementById. Now there's another one that's available here called Digit by ID, and this is a little bit different than the Dojo by ID because Dojo by ID is going to return a DOM element. Digit by ID is going to return a digit widget. Dojo.addOnLoad, it's a lot like the standard window.onload. However, this is using the Dojo function to load it up before all the elements have been downloaded. We also have the Dojo.connect, which is going to allow us to do event handling, and it's pretty straightforward on how that's set up. So if you take a look here in the example, it's Dojo.connect. The first item is the element that we're going to attach the behavior to. So in this case, we're attaching it to the button. We're attaching the hello pressed function for when you click on the button. So here we have our function set up for hello pressed with an alert that's going to pop up. Alright, next we have dojo.forEach, and this is somewhat like the for each loop in JavaScript 1.6. Now this is going to come in handy whenever we use dojo.query. And we're going to see dojo.query in just one second here, but this is going to allow us to cycle through a number of different elements performing specific actions on all of the elements that are targeted. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll on down here, and we're actually using it in here. It's kind of a concise way to do this. And as I mentioned, we would see dojo.query. And what dojo.query allows us to do is it allows us to select all of the items that match a specific criteria. So in this example, what it's trying to do is it's trying to select all select object in the document. So once it has selected all of those items, we then run it through this for each. So for each one of those selected items, it sets the disabled property to true. So they're all going to be disabled select boxes. Now down below that, you'll also see a more concise version of that, where it's again selecting all of the select boxes, and then for each one of them, it's using this item to represent each one of those items. It's setting its disabled to true. And that's really cool. The dojo.query is a very powerful element, and in fact, let's go ahead here and jump over to the left-hand side, and you'll see selecting DOM nodes with dojo.query. So here, it talks a little bit more about that. And here's some examples of using Cascading Style Sheet 3 selectors to select items on our page. If you take a look below that, you'll see there's a number of other ways to select, but we're going to get into actual selecting whenever we get into our project. I'm going to take a look at one more thing here before we conclude this basic overview, and that's the XML HTTP request object, or the XHR. Inside of Dojo, we have the XHR, which is going to allow us to do our AJAX requests. I'm going to go ahead and click on this Hello AJAX World to take a look at this, and we've got kind of a little simple setup here. So here's the code that goes into it, and it's using the dojo.xhrget, which has a number of options tied to it. So first of all is the URL that it's going to be asking for information. The second is how it's going to handle that information, either as text, JSON, JavaScript, whatever you want there. You can set it up to handle actually a number of different things. Timeout, how long it's going to wait before it errors out. Then load, what's going to happen in the event of a successful operation. And then error, what's going to happen in the event of a failure. Now in Dojo, you're also using these inline functions quite a bit for a lot of different things. So that's a real quick overview of how you can make selections, how you can add in events, and how you can do AJAX all very quickly here in Dojo.